Would you still make the same decision even if it cost you thousands of dollars? We're going to talk about it on today's podcast and why doing the right thing is the right thing, even when it costs you. On today's show, I'll be chatting about some examples where integrity was the right decision, even when it was the painful decision. In fact, that is what really measures the quality of who you are as a person, making those tough decisions when it's not necessarily in your best interest. Hey, I'm the host of the show. My name's Blake Benz. I've been doing the Good Advice podcast for, 6+ years now. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to our humble little show. Thanks for tuning in to today's podcast episode. And my sincere hope would be that you're going to walk away from our show today with some actionable, practical advice on how you can run your business better. Before we dive into today's episode, we have an incredible business that is sponsoring this episode. Let me give them a quick shout out, and we'll be right back soon to the content of today's show. See you soon. Do you ever feel like your payment processor is robbing you blind? For some of us, it's not blind. We look at the amount of money that's going to our payment processor month after month, and a lot of times we ask ourselves, is there a better way? I'm making good money, yet so much of it isn't actually ending up in my pocket. In the world of payment processing, in many cases, it's a cashless world, so you have to have a payment processor you can really trust. I personally am a big fan of Brad Norwood, who's the owner of PrimePaymentsUSA.com. Brad's a business owner himself. He knows all the challenges that come with running a business. More importantly, he knows the value of an individual customer. See, some of these bigger businesses, they're all about scale. They're all about bringing in as many customers as possible. But do they know your name? Do they know your business? Do they know what's important to you? In many cases, the answer is no. And in worst cases, they're just looking to get as much money from every transaction that you work hard for, which really doesn't feel too good. So you got to reach out to Brad Norwood today and understand how he's doing business and why it can save you money month after month. More importantly, you might even ask him about his zero-fee payment processing that he's offering to a select few of people. Go to PrimePaymentsUSA.com and start putting the money that you worked hard for back into your pocket. So this is something that I like to talk about every now and then. It is something that I've sort of bottled it and presented it. Bottled, it's kind of a weird way to put it. I've packaged it as talking through values before. I've presented it as thinking about your legacy before. But I want to bring us back to the value of simply doing the right thing. The longer that I'm in business, the more I realize how many corners people cut when it comes to their businesses. And let me just say a quick disclaimer for today's episode, just because I don't want this getting cross. I am a flawed human being. I am a broken person in that I make the best decisions that I can. There's times I am too impatient. There's times I lose my temper. There's times that I'm a little bit more insensitive than I'd like to admit. And unfortunately, that is just the nature of who I am as a human being. Now, granted, I think on the spectrum of all behaviors in the world, I'd like to think that I'm a pretty solid dude, that I'm at least a decent human being. And those of you who've known me long term, I hope you would agree with that. But I am putting out this quick disclaimer before we dive into today's episode, only because you and I together are working through this concept of doing the right thing, this concept of having integrity in your business and in your brand. And this is very much not do as I say and follow me. This is very much, hey, this is a central foundational point to me as a person, as a father, to what I'm teaching my kids, as the way that I do business. And so let's agree to work through this together, knowing that you and we're flawed. Now, I don't know, maybe you're listening and you're not that flawed. I had someone I was responding to a social media question on marriage advice. And I wrote out this reply that was something like, the thing about marriage is, and I've been married for almost 11 years now. I wrote something like, the thing about marriage is you are coming to terms with your own selfishness. You're realizing the things that are deeply important to you. You're realizing the things that you are overly sensitive about, and you are essentially learning to do life with this other person. If you've never been married before, this might be a newsflash to you that marriage is a lot less of the rom-com that you've seen on TV, and you are developing a friendship for life. This person is your best friend. So part of that is understanding, what does it look like for us to do life together? I'm not the perfect husband, I'm not the perfect spouse, but I'm trying to do a better job each and every day. So I wrote something like that on this social media post about, like, it was something like your genuine best marriage advice. Well, someone responded, and I feel like all of that's pretty fair, by the way. I don't feel like any of that's too outlandish or weird. Well, somebody responded to my post, and they said something to the effect of, wow, I guess I know who's getting divorced next. It sounds like you're a terrible human being. Something like that. I can't remember what it was. And this person also added, me and my wife, we've never fought. We will never fight, yada, yada, which is fine. I read it and I thought, okay, I'm happy for you. But here I was getting dunked on for, I guess, being a little too honest or having too raw a perspective on doing life with another person. So all that to say, that's all my big show about. Again, I'm not sharing anything today that I've mastered or that I'm an expert at. But I want to really dig into this concept today about understanding the value of doing the right thing. I think many of us have heard the expression that, what's the expression with the tortoise and the hare? Oh my gosh, I'm like totally blanking now on this very common, very simple story. But the bottom line is we tell stories around how if you do the right thing, if you put in the work, you'll eventually win. Years ago, I taught a class at the U of A. I was an adjunct professor, and I was teaching a class on like ethics and integrity. And I would ask students this question of, why do you do the right thing? Why do you not cheat? Why do you not steal? Why do you, not break the law? All these very basic questions. And one of the most common answers, in fact, I'd rarely get any answer other than this, was that it would eventually pay off. Doing the right thing will eventually pay off for you. And I loved being this little bit of a button pusher where I'd respond with, okay, what if it doesn't though? And students would hear that question and they'd say, well, it eventually will. I said, but what if it doesn't? What if doing the right thing doesn't eventually pay off? And there was like this sort of like, and I taught this class for a few years, so I loved getting to this day of the lecture and presenting this question because it was very much blank stares. And, well, hang on, this doesn't make sense. What do you mean? Like, you do the right thing and eventually it comes back around, right? Which I guess that's karma, right? But what I presented was, what if it doesn't though? What if, we hear the story of the person who, maybe they did the right thing and they got fired, but then, that opened a door to something else, which led to this next position. What if the story is you just got fired? You were trying to do the right thing. It didn't work out. You got let go. Now, this isn't like meant to be like a cynical or like nihilist, like hang with me for a second. I'm not saying like, anything like bleak about our life. What I am trying to do is help you understand that the more you understand how integrity works as a value, the more you begin to understand the actions you take and you reprogram the reason you do things. As a culture, we are very interested in satisfaction and pleasure and dopamine hits. I mean, TikTok brain is an expression all around dopamine and looking for that next social media fix. Be careful not to see your decision making in the same way of I will make the decision that gives me the biggest dopamine hit and the biggest delivery of pleasure and what benefits me the most monetarily. Sometimes doing the right thing is going to cost you. I tell this story because I was at a meeting this morning and a friend of mine was sharing a story about the construction company he works with. This construction company, local construction company, they were building houses. Well, one employee who was disgruntled, this employee who was doing the plumbing for some houses in this neighborhood, purposefully did the plumbing incorrectly. Now, what this led to was all the houses were sold, people moved in, and sewage began to fill these homes through the shower drains, toilets, what have you. So naturally, the builder gets called, this company. And they come to find out this employee did, in fact, do this intentionally. Here's what integrity looked like for the owner of this company. They had to literally tear down some of these houses and do it the right way. They had to tear down these houses, rebuild them, and fix the sewage issues under the homes. In fact, one family was so upset by it, they didn't want the home anymore. They didn't want the new home. So this construction company bought them out, bought their home from them so that they could go buy a new house, one that they would be happy with. That's integrity. Was it the company's owner's fault? It wasn't. Obviously not. But that's integrity because this is someone who saw it through the lens of these people trusted my brand. They bought homes from me. And ultimately, and that's the crown of leadership, right? As much as I'd like to blame it on someone who works here, ultimately, it falls back on me. I'll tell you another story that came out from the same conversation. A friend of mine runs a payment processing company. And essentially what happened was one of his new customers, a good customer on paper, was doing something a little shady with their finances. Now, my friend could have easily just looked the other way and said, okay, yeah, hey, be a little more subtle about it, you know? But instead it was like, hey, we're not gonna be able to work together anymore. I can't help you. What's the benefit to that? That doesn't put money in his pocket. It doesn't help him. It hurts him. He's lost revenue by now turning this customer away. See, integrity, making decisions with integrity, is not about pulling levers to make more money. It's doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, even when it costs you. Now, I think for many of us, this is where it gets a little difficult because when we think about this concept of integrity, we think, I've never stolen from my customers. I've never lied, like grossly lied about what someone bought. If someone bought a loaf of bread from me, they didn't open the bag to find a frog. Like I didn't lie or mislead people. I'm not a scammer. And so the way we typically approach integrity is, well, I'm not as bad as that guy, or I didn't do that for my customers. But let me clue you in on what integrity really looks like. If integrity by definition is what you say you will do is what you will do, if the ways that you talk about your business is the experience that people get from it, I'm not talking about necessarily like the quality of service. I'm talking about the way you sold it to them. Does that match the experience that they got? And if the answer is no, you don't have a business built on integrity. If you made a lot of promises that you didn't keep, and let me make this even more granular for you. If you told a customer that it would be done on Friday, and now it's a month past that, and you've given 3 different reasons for the delay, you're not running a business on integrity. You're not running a business where your values are dictating the direction you want to take your business. Now, like I already said, you're running a brand because it doesn't profit you to have integrity. It's not because of the money you make, but this is how you build a reputation. This is how you build a meaningful brand long term. This is how you get better customers long term. Because when someone comes around with $10,000 to spend and they're thinking about all the different companies they can spend it with, they're going to think of you if you've thought hard about making good decisions, if you've been intentional on building your reputation. It's honestly something that scares me a lot because I think about how much work I've put into my reputation. And I think about all it takes is one bad judgment call. All it takes is one decision that is outside my values to ruin all of that. It honestly scares me, which not like I'm trembling over here, but I'm often vigilant in thinking about this and frankly praying that God will help me to stay near to the values and systems that I have grown up with and that I won't sway away from them. And I want to read this email I got. I got an email from somebody this last week. He said, "Hey, Blake, I remembered why I missed coming to the Tuesday meetings this morning." This was the Tuesday growth groups that we do. He said, "I never talked too much, but I've learned so much from everyone in the group." And then he said, "I want to commend you on your consistency and integrity. I've never heard you contradict yourself or your past advice. I may never be a customer for you, but I'm a fan of what you do in the group and on your podcast." This is fuel for me. This isn't to be braggadocious. This is to tell you that integrity is such a key ingredient for how I do business that it's not about getting someone to become a customer. It's about doing the right thing. And when I shared this post on social media, I added a poem that Tom Verdery, who was a P&G executive, he retired. He was working at this consulting company that I was working at, and he would share this poem as well. Let me read this to you. This is an abridged version of the poem "The Man in the Glass" by Peter Dale Wimbrow Sr. And it reads, "When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be headache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass." Rules to live by. Do right by your customers. Do the right thing, even when no one's there to congratulate you for doing it. Hey, let's keep this journey going, and let's agree together to continue to work towards having businesses of integrity. If you enjoyed today's episode and you're a first-time listener to the show, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you're at. Don't forget, we do have a Patreon for the podcast if you want to support us, patreon.com/goodadvice, or you can jump on our advertising schedule, or you can email me, blake@goodadvicecoaching.com. Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for your support. That's today's good advice. See you later.